In this episode of the Stop Physician Burnout podcast, I'm going to discuss the symptoms of the number one threat to your career, your livelihood, to your direct reports, to your organization, and that's physician burnout. So let's talk about the three symptoms of physician burnout, and it's way more than being just exhausted. You have to be able to recognize these in yourself and in your direct reports if you're going to be a maximally effective physician leader. Check it out. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Stop Physician Burnout podcast, a physician leadership podcast where you will learn the skills so that we can join together and lead the charge to physician well-being. Skills to earn the respect of your colleagues in the front lines, skills to exercise true influence in the C-suite, and take back your job, your practice, your career, and your life. All of these tools have been proven effective in my 40,000 doctor physician coaching and training practice. And if I know one thing, I know you're super busy. So let's get started. There's a shadow that haunts every healthcare workplace. It can affect anybody who sees patients for a living, anybody who puts the patient first. I'm talking, of course, about burnout, and burnout is at higher than normal rates in doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs, first responders, techs, everybody who puts the patient first. If the patient comes first for you and your job, you're at excess risk of burnout. So one of the key skills of being an effective leader in a healthcare setting, a physician leader, is to be able to recognize burnout in your colleagues and your direct reports, and to recognize burnout in yourself. Because the last thing you would want to do is be a burned out leader, modeling burnout instead of reaching out to address it. That would be a tragedy. So let's talk about the symptoms of burnout so that you can recognize them in yourself and others. Now, burnout was first recognized in the 1970s in the workplace by people like Christina Maslach, one of the original researchers, who was studying employees in non-healthcare businesses in the Bay Area of San Francisco in the 1970s. Now, she's an industrial psychologist, and she was assigned a study about employee engagement. And she went and did some surveys at the job site and found engagement, but they also found something that seemed to be the opposite of engagement. It was on the same continuum, and it was burnout. Now, it didn't seem to be a penalty for you to really dig your job and be totally engaged. There didn't seem to be any negative consequences to that. But over here on the burnout side of the spectrum, the more burned out you were, things got weird because it started to affect you physically, and it started to become portable and you would take it home. She developed a screening survey called the Maslach Burnout Inventory, which is the gold standard for measuring burnout, and she defined 3 symptoms of burnout. Before we go any further, I just want to say burnout is not a mental illness. Burnout, when it's severe, has complications that can be depression, drugs, alcohol, and suicide. But burnout itself is not a mental illness like those diagnoses. So, symptom number 1. Symptom number 1 is physical and emotional exhaustion. And the little voice in your head that will help you recognize this is when you're so tired and you've been so tired for so long that the little voice in your head says, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep going like this. And you may notice that in your head. You may hear colleagues saying it, okay? Be on the lookout for that level of physical and emotional exhaustion. Symptom number 2, she called depersonalization. But what she meant was that all of a sudden you begin to get cynical and sarcastic. You may feel like you have to vent about these patients before you can go back to taking care of them again. It's when you lose the ability to be emotionally available for others. It's emotional exhaustion. That's number 2. So exhausted, cynical, and sarcastic. Number 3 is when you begin to doubt that your work is serving any purpose. It's a spiritual disconnection from your work and your light worker essence. And the little voice in this symptom of burnout is, what's the use? I'm really not making a difference here. Now, while you're feeling exhausted, cynical, and sarcastic, and what's the use, your energy level is spiraling downwards. And it's very negative and can be negative for short periods of time, or I've seen people whose energy was negative at work And I mean negative in terms of its quantity. It's below zero. And we'll talk about why the battery analogy, my batteries are run down, is completely inaccurate in a future episode. But your energy is way below zero. And that can be a chronic condition. It can go on for years and years. But when you have all three symptoms and your energy is negative, what will happen is you will go into survival mode. Just going into work and giving your energy to your patients is a threat to your integrity. You'll put your head down, you'll drag yourself from patient to patient, and on the inside, you're praying that you can just make it to the end of the day. So maybe you can go home and maybe tonight you can get some rest and feel better in the morning. The thing about survival mode is that it's a lot easier to see in someone else than it is in yourself. We as individuals are often the last person to recognize burnout when it's present. So as a leader, as you go to the wards and the wings and the services and you're meeting people and shadowing and rounding on people, you're meeting with people, shadowing and rounding on them regularly, right? Keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the front lines. Yes? Okay, cool. As you're doing that, it's easier for you to notice changes in personality, changes in energy, changes in attitude, people who are dragging themselves from patient to patient. That's survival mode. And what I want you to do is if you're thinking about somebody right now, I just mentioned survival mode, cynical, sarcastic, dragging themselves, change in their attitude and enthusiasm. If you're thinking about something you are concerned might be burned out, I want you to write their name down. Even if it's half a dozen names, write down the names of the people you're concerned about, because in a future episode, I'm going to show you exactly how to reach out to them. And it's important that we be able to do this. And the reason is we can't stop all suicides in healthcare because doctors are just too darn good at killing themselves and too darn good at hiding their struggles. What we can do is reach out. And in the next episode of the Stop Physician Burnout podcast, I'm going to show you how to reach out to a colleague in distress. Quick review. 3 symptoms of burnout. Physically and emotionally exhausted. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep going like this. Cynical, sarcastic, venting. And the last one is, what's the use? I'm really not serving a purpose here. Go into survival mode. If you recognize it in you, or if somebody intervenes on you and asks you if you're okay, and on reflection, you realize that you're suffering from burnout, it's time to take a break, to recharge your energy accounts, and to begin to modify the way that you practice medicine, modify your workloads, modify your ability to get your charts done, modify the sheer amount of effort it takes you to do your job so that you can maintain a positive energy level going forward, which is something I've helped doctors do for 14 years now, thousands of them. And in future episodes of this podcast, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of those tools. But for now, be on the lookout. As you make your rounds and shadow your people, be on the lookout for somebody who's struggling and in survival mode. When you look in the mirror in the morning, how are you doing? No, really, really, how are you doing? And if you are struggling, I hope that you find a way to reach out for help and get the rest you need to recharge your energy accounts and take back your ability to be an effective light worker and serve your purpose as a doctor in your job on behalf of your family, and get back on in the saddle in a way that's healthy and not draining and not compromising your life force in order to accomplish the goals of your job description. That's it for now. I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, keep breathing and have a great rest of your day.